So the last thing that we really need for our Asteroids game, given that this is our project, is we have shooting and we have asteroids and the player can die. I don't really want just one life. I want the concept of having some number of lives before I actually lose the game, because based on what I do, like based on how many asteroids I blow up, I also want to have the concept of score, and eventually if I get enough score, then I'll get more lives. Okay? And then we'll do a little bit of tuning on our game to also make it so that when we are playing our game, that it actually plays and is something that is fun to play. And right now it's like pretty easy. Like this actually has very little challenge because the asteroids are moving very slowly. But we'll see if we can find a way to make it actually more fun. Okay. So right now our player dies and then it's game over. And I want to change it so the player has a concept of lives, and instead the game over is handled only when you run out of lives. And I also want to draw a player ship that represents how many lives you have. So if I set it up so that the player, like when he dies, he doesn't immediately call game over. Instead, what I want to do is I actually want to have the player be able to respawn. So how do I get the player to respawn? So whenever I'm doing something like this, I always like to just do the simplest approach possible. So what if I just have a button, for instance, that lets me respawn? And if I press that button, and I'll actually create a new player. So let's see if we can set that up. And then once we have that, then we can just invoke that behavior instead of pressing a key. So let's go here. So right now our player is actually spawning here inside of our main CPP. This isn't actually going to work because if I want the player to respawn, I need to run this code again. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a function in my engine that's called respawn player. And this function here is going to go right below the update function in game engine. And I'm going to move the code that's here inside of our main. This code right here instead, I'm going to call Unreal Engine 6.respawn player at the beginning of the game. And then in here, I'm just going to create the player like so. Okay. And what this means, it doesn't really change the functionality. I just moved where that function was being called. But now, if I do happen to die, I can call this function. Like let's say here, so I press R and it respawns the player. I can call this function and it will respawn the player every time I press R. So for instance, if I just call R, I can respawn the player like so. Now I'm not checking to see that if he's dead or not. I don't really care about that, but I just want to check that my function is working. So I'm going to run to an asteroid, I hit R, and there's my player. And every time I press R, I'm actually getting more players. So I'm actually, this is like, and every player is like shooting. It's kind of like an interesting take on a game. You can see here that it doesn't really matter where I am. Respawning the player seems to work okay. I think this game is a little bit too easy now. I can't believe that asteroid hasn't been hit yet. All right. Here's our super bullets. Okay, so now we know that this respawn player behavior works. So what I want to do is I want to make the concept of when I die, I want to actually have the player respawn automatically. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take this R behavior out because now I know that it works. And in the player, when the player gets destroyed, if I'm going to search for player : collided with, instead of calling is game over, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call respawn player when they die. So every time I die, I'm going to respawn immediately. I'm also going to blow the player up. Oops. Make sure that I'm calling this correctly. One other thing to keep in mind is I'm running into a case now where if I actually happen to die immediately, I bet she's actually calling respawn player all the time. Like so. Yeah, I'm actually hitting an asteroid right away. So this is going to be a problem because as soon as I die, it's going to spawn a player, like so. Oops. if I can hit this asteroid. So there I am, I died. However, if an asteroid is on top of me when I'm respawning, the game's going to be stuck in an infinite loop, right? So there I am, and if I can get an asteroid over there, that asteroid is going to spawn. It's going to prevent me from spawning because every frame I'm going to be spawning the player, and if I happen to die, like so, you see how I'm respawning right away, it'll cause the player to basically never be able to get out. So let's add a couple things to mitigate that. One, we're going to add the concept of lives, so you only have 3 lives to be able to do this. And 2, we're going to add the concept of invulnerability. So respawn player, this function, all it does is it respawns a player, but I want to have the concept of player lives. So I'm going to create just an integer here, and this player lives variable is going to start off at, let's say 4, because I want you to have 1 life that you're running around in and 3 spare lives on top of that. And what we're going to do is we're going to subtract from player lives, and then we're going to say, like, if player lives is greater than 0, that's the only time that we actually spawn the player. So every time you call respawn player, it's going to reduce the number of lives by 1, and it's only going to spawn them if you actually still have lives remaining. So now at least, so you can see here, I spawned and I immediately died, probably because an asteroid was on top of me. So there I am. So I'm going to die 3 times. 1, 2, 3, and there's my last life. So now I no longer respawn anymore. So we have these player lives. What's nice is that I can actually just draw this player lives on screen as well. It's actually pretty straightforward. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the number of player lives I have, and I'm going to draw a little baby ship for each one of those. Like so. And I'm going to draw a player for each one of those things. So I'm going to use the same image I'm using for the player, because I want to show the number of lives on screen. Where's my player? This guy right here. And what I'm going to do is, there's a couple ways I could do this, but I'm going to show you the simple way, which is I have this texture here. I'm going to load this thing from file as well. Like so. And once I have this, I'm going to draw this little texture 3 times, or for however many player lives I have. Instead of doing this game object size, I'm going to have a loop that goes over player lives remaining. And then I have a sprite here. Like so. And I'm taking my window and I'm going to draw the ship sprite. I'm also going to offset the ship sprite a little bit. So each ship is a little bit offset from one another. And this loop is going to run 3 times. Oh, it looks like I died immediately again. We're going to have to solve that soon. Every time I respawn, if asteroids are on top of my player spawn, I die and lose all my lives immediately. So you can see here, those are my 3 ships over here. Those are not like real ships. They look like it though. So I'm going to shrink them down and move them a little bit so that the opacity makes it so that those ships don't look like player ships. So I'm going to scale them down a little bit by 0.5. And I'm going to set the color here and then we're going to make them slightly transparent by passing in 128 for the alpha portion. Hopefully it lets me spawn. So those are my player ships. They're a little too far apart, they're a little too far down, but we're getting there. We'll move these guys about 50 units, like so. And every time I die, I'm going to lose one of those ships. So watch as I hit an asteroid. So I lost one of those ships in the top left. And it kind of just indicates how many ships I have remaining. So there we go. Okay. This is drawing our ship behavior. I'm going to move this also to be below everything. One thing also, our game over text isn't drawing anymore. So what we've got to do is, when we call respawn player, if the case is that we actually don't have any player lives remaining, we're going to call set is game over here, so that the text will draw again. So I immediately lost again. See if I can get this thing to actually run. There I am. 1, 2, 3. Okay, cool. Our game is now has player lives in it. So I mentioned that there's a problem because like half the time I run this game I die immediately. So we're going to add a concept of invulnerability so that right when you spawn, you don't die right away. Instead, you're going to have a period of time when the player is not going to be able to collide with asteroids. So the player right now, when he collides with an asteroid, he always destroys himself and respawns. But I can add a condition in here to say like, hey, if you haven't been alive for even more than a second or two, don't worry about this behavior. So I'm going to add a concept of invulnerability time. That's invulnerable time left. And in the player constructor, I'm going to set this thing to be, I don't know, 2 seconds. And then in the update function for the player, I'm going to subtract from invulnerable time left by delta time. And now, if this thing is less than, greater than 0, that means I'm actually still invulnerable. So what I'm going to do is put an if statement right here around this collision detection. And now this invulnerable time left will prevent me from hitting an asteroid within the first 2 seconds of when I spawn. So there I am. 2 seconds I spawn, and see how I actually don't collide with an asteroid right away. This will mean that at least when I spawn, even if an asteroid is right on top of me, I still won't die right away. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to visibly represent this too. Like I'd like to draw something around the player when he's invulnerable. So we can do that too pretty easily. So the player, another nice part about object-oriented programming, I can just create a draw function for the player. So I'm going to take this draw function for the game object. And when the player has invulnerability time left, I'm going to draw a little circle around the player. Go here. Like so. And I'm going to call the game object draw function. That's always important. But now, if my invulnerable time left, what was that variable I used? Invulnerable time left, is greater than 0, what I can do is I can just draw a circle. And I can set my invuln circle to be transparent, but have a set outline thickness 3, and I can also set the outline color. And I'm also going to move the position of this thing. I'm going to set the origin here. And you also need to have a radius. Let's have the radius be collision radius. I'll set the radius here to be the collision radius. And I can set the origin as well to be the collision radius again. And one last part, I need to make sure the position here is the same as the player position, like so. Now, when I run, oh, I didn't call draw on it yet. I will see a blue circle representing that I am currently invulnerable, like so. And as soon as the circle goes away, it means I'm no longer invulnerable. So let's adjust this a little bit here. That's my collision radius. I don't really actually like that. That doesn't. Let's just do like, I don't know, 50. And also, I'd like to be able to represent how much time is remaining. There's our invulnerable. Why don't we have the thickness be pretty thick to begin with, and then shrink over time. So if I set the outline thickness to be 10, and we know the invulnerable time, let's do 5 times invulnerable time left. We'll just make the radius based on how much time is remaining. So it starts off at like 10 and shrinks down to 0 over time. So you can see here that invulnerable radius goes away. So you actually have an idea for how long you have left remaining. All right. How about we make the player actually have a flashing behavior too? I think that this is kind of something kind of nice. Like if you ever play like those beat 'em up games or any kind of game where like the player ship will like blink, we can add that behavior too in here. So we have this concept of, let's just have an opacity here for the ship opacity. And we're going to use sign here because the invulnerable time left remaining is going to give me a value that starts at high and goes down to 0. It gets counted down to 0. If I take this and I multiply this by 10, I can printf the ship opacity here. And what it's going to do is going to tell me, it's going to give me a number that kind of bounces back and forth. And a number that bounces back and forth is useful because I want my alpha to bounce back and forth. Oops. But this number, this ship opacity, is going to be based on, so I don't know if you guys can see, but this number on the top left starts at like 1. Starts at 1 at the top, counts down to 0, then goes to -1, then goes back up to 1, and then 0 and -1. So it's bouncing between 0 and -1 because that's what a sine curve looks like, right? Like a sine curve. If you look at the value, it goes from 0 to 1 to -1. So it goes back and forth. So we can use this to our advantage to control the ship opacity too. So if I take this ship opacity, I'm going to add 1 to it, and then I'm going to multiply by 0.5, so that instead of going from -1 to 1, it's going to go from 0 to 1. I normalized it, so if I run this again, this ship opacity now is going to go from 0 to 1, 0 to 1, 0 to 1, over and over again. This is because I'm adding 1 to the value of the result, which we know can go all the way down to -1. So when it's -1, it's actually I'm going to make it 0. And when it's 1, it's going to turn into 2, because I'm adding 1 to it. Then I'm just going to cut the whole thing in half. What now I can do is I can take my sprite, and I can set this color to be ship opacity times 255. I'm taking the sprite of the ship, and I'm setting the color to be based on the value of ship opacity. You guys can see the ship is actually going in and out, fading in and out. And I can change how fast this goes by increasing this number here. The higher this number is that I'm passing it a sign, the faster the blinking is, right? So I also want to make sure that the ship is getting set to the highest opacity when I'm not fading. And now we have a behavior so that when the ship spawns, it blinks for a little bit, and then I die and it blinks again. And that blinking behavior is literally just me passing the number to sign, which is our time left, and I'm using that to control the opacity. And that's how you get like blinking behavior. Okay. All right. Cool. So we have the player lives. When we run out of lives, we show game over. And we make the player invulnerable for 3 seconds. In this case, it's like 2. Oh, we're not supposed to be allowed to shoot when they're invulnerable either. So let's see if we can fix that behavior as well. So while you're invulnerable, I don't want you to be able to like blow things up because it's kind of unfair. I mean, you can change it if you want to locally. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to make it so that I only run this code for weapon firing if my invulnerable time left is less than 0. Which means if I'm holding down spacebar, I'm not allowed to shoot right now. As soon as invulnerable time goes up, I can shoot. Okay. All right. Let's add some sound effects, shall we? Actually, I can leave you guys the sound effects portion to be done by you, because you guys have done sound effects stuff before. I do want to do one more thing before I give you guys the final, and I'll give you guys time in class today to talk about it. A few more things, which is part of this homework I was originally going to give you. We're going to have the concept of score and levels to our game next. So I want to get score for blowing up asteroids, because what's the point of a game if you can't show that you're better than everyone at it, right? I also want to have the concept of multiple levels and increasing difficulty, so that on level 1 you'll get 5 asteroids, and on level 5 you'll get 9 asteroids, and so on and so forth. Okay. So why don't we have the concept of score first? So everything that I blow up is going to have some score value associated with it. So we're going to go back to our game engine, which is at the top here. We already have player lives. We can have player score as well. And we can have a function that says add score. And we take the value that's passed in and we add it to the player's score. Then when we're drawing stuff, I can use the same thing. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to load this font once for make sure that I only do this thing one time. I'm going to move this thing to be a variable here. And we're going to load the font in the constructor here. And we're going to set the font here. The reason is that I always want to draw the score. I just don't want to have to load the font every frame because it's pretty expensive to do. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this text and we're going to use this text here. We're going to use a smaller character size. We're going to set the position slightly below the player's ships. And let's just draw this text like so for now. Just want to position it here. There's our score. I'll move it a little bit here. Excuse me. There's our score. So I want it to start off at 0 and I want to climb up. So if you guys remember, there's a way to actually have this string be formatted. What I want to do is I have this score, which happens to be an integer, like so, and I want to convert it into a string, right? So what I'm going to do is we're going to create a standard string, score string, and we're going to set score string. We have this thing called ostring stream, if you guys remember that. Let's see if I can find a better example of this. Okay, we're going to try this here. Now, the best place to do this excuse me while I find the actual responsible thing. Alright, I actually gave it to you here as well. So I need to use this standard toString. I can use that, so we're going to try this here today. We're going to take our score text, which is here, and we're going to add the score string here, and when we pass it in, we're going to pass in score string like so. And we should see 0 here as part of our player score, like so. And I want to make it so that every time an asteroid dies, it tells the game to add score. It just so happens that we already have something that says when the asteroid dies to do something. So we can take our engine, and we can call add score, and we can add 100 to it every time we blow up a large one. This is me just adding, calling the function on the engine to add score. And we need to repeat this behavior for all the medium and small ones too. So I'm going to take this add score in destroy, and I'm going to add it here as well. And I need one for the small asteroid too, which I don't happen to have right now. So I'm going to take this function. I'm going to have the small asteroid. And then we're going to add 20 score for every small asteroid we blow up to. So now, when I shoot things, I get 100, and I'm getting score for everything I blow up. Okay. The final thing that we're going to do for our Asteroids game is we need to add the concept of when I blow up all the asteroids, I just want to spawn more. Right now, when I kill the last one, I don't actually win or anything like that. So there's nothing left for me to shoot, unfortunately. So I want to have asteroids spawn again in this case when I restart the level. Okay. So how do I tell that all the asteroids have been blown up? Well, for the player, we have player lives, and we can tell the game object, the game engine, that all the player has been destroyed. However, the number of asteroids actually shrinks and grows and shrinks over time based on how many asteroids are alive right now. So what I'm going to do is, the right way for me to tell whether I've won or not is if all the asteroids have been blown up. So what if I just go over all the objects that I know about, and if I don't find any asteroids in my list, that kind of means to me that I've blown up everything that I know about. So I'm going to write that code that says, hey, let's go into my game engine, and inside my update function here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over every single object, and if I can't find any objects at all that are an asteroid, then that means that I've won. So I'm going to write a loop here that's going to go over every game object, like so. And I'm going to try to cast it to be an asteroid by using a dynamic cast again. And if the asteroid is not equal to null, that means that I found an asteroid. Game is still going. That means I can break out of this loop. So I can have a variable here, say all asteroids destroyed. And I can assume that by default everything is destroyed. But if I find an asteroid, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this thing to false. And then I'm going to write an if statement right here that says all asteroids destroyed right here. And here, this means that all asteroids gone. I'm going to do a printf when I blow up all the asteroids. So as a test, I'm just going to shrink the number of asteroids I'm spawning to 1. And I should see something here on the left when I blow up all these asteroids. So I can see here now it tells me that all the asteroids are gone. Because I've gone through everything in the list, I go through every object and I cast that object to be an asteroid. If that cast succeeds, that means I found at least one, and I only need to find one to know that I still have to keep going. However, once all the asteroids are gone, I can actually just spawn them here again. So I'm going to make a function inside my engine, just like how we have respawn player, respawn asteroids. And I'm going to implement this function, and this is where I'm going to actually do all my asteroid spawning. So I'm going to move my asteroid spawning from here. I'm going to take that out of here. This is also all part of trying to make our main function as small as possible. I'm going to call respawn asteroids on the engine. And in here I'm going to paste that code I got from main, and I'm just going to call add object here. So what I can do is I can call respawn objects, respawn asteroids, when all the asteroids are destroyed. So I'm going to put inside that if statement the call to that function. So now when I blow up this asteroid, I should get another one. There's another one that's just spawned. So now it's one asteroid at a time I'm doing this. But I want our game to increase in difficulty too. The way that I want to increase in difficulty is by having a level variable. And our level variable is going to start off at 0. And it's going to go up by 1 every time we call respawn asteroids. So respawn asteroids, I'm going to call, add 1 to level. And I'm just going to take this and use it in the loop instead. So for every level that I go up, I'm going to spawn 1 additional asteroid. So at first I start off with 1. like so. Now I have 2. And then when I blow these up, I should have 3. Cool. A couple things I can do that are kind of neat. I want to make sure that I'm always spawning at least 5. So I'll add 4 to my loop. And anytime I add score, I want my score to act as a multiplier as well. So for every level I go up, I want to multiply my score by that amount. So when I call add score, I'm going to also multiply the level by the value here. So on level 1, I'll get the right amount of score. On level 2, I'll get double the score. On level 3, I'll get triple the score. But now if I blow up all of these asteroids, I'm going to do a cheat here. I'm going to do a little bit of a cheat. We're going to do right now these things are spawning and I have weapon cooldown here. I'm going to do a weapon cooldown of 0.1 for my super bullet. And then if I blow up this last asteroid, I should get 6 asteroids that show up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. Cool. Okay, so aside from sound and like a main menu or anything like that, our Asteroids game is pretty much complete. We have all the behavior that we need for making our Asteroids game have multiple difficulties, have increasing score as you kill things, and player spawning is also mostly correct. So what I'm going to do now is I'd like to go over, I'm going to remove this super bullet thing. Like so. I'm going to put this up on Zool, and then we're going to talk about our final project here. I'm going to give you guys this folder to give you something to start from. Okay, so final. I'm giving you guys the rest of the time today in class to work on this, as well as next week. And then week 11, I will collect them, and then we'll do our final week. We won't have a lecture on the final week. We'll do something fun. I want you guys to take this game that we made, and I want you to add a twist to it. This is a lot like how we did Pong. The twist can be anything you want. If you are not sure, if it's not one of these valid ideas that I gave you, then you need to make sure you vet it with me to make sure it's okay. It should be an extension on the game of Asteroids. So some examples of things that are valid ideas, things that are not too easy, are like adding an AI-controlled UFO, adding a menu letting you control the difficulty of the game, adding a second player you can play co-op with, a high score system that saves your high scores between closing and reopening the game, or adding power-ups that the player can hit to change the game in interesting ways. It's your choice. You can pick any other thing aside from these if you want to, if you have ideas. I'm always open to that. But things that you shouldn't really be doing are like changing the size of the asteroids of the player is not really sufficient. Changing the speed or the amount of bullets you fire or how fast you shoot isn't really enough. So those are simple, just value tunings. I want you guys to actually implement some gameplay. So the final, what I want you to hand in is, I want you to hand in a version of Asteroids with your twist. It has to have a controllable player and destructible asteroids, and it has to have sound effects and music. You also have to deliver me everything that you did, including all the sprites and sound effects that you created. Okay. Okay. So in Zool, in the final project folder, I put the engine and SFML folders that you guys can use. It's exactly what I just did in class. So you can use this as a starting point, and you can adjust this to be have your final twist added to it.